Morning, guys. On our way to a new job this morning. It's Friday. We are headed out to a little town called Mattawa, Washington, which is also in the lower Columbia Basin. You can Google that. It's along the Columbia River. We have more cherries to do there. This company out of Yakima, we're going to be doing quite a bit of work for them, but this one job is in Mattawa, and then from there we have two jobs in Mattawa, and then we will go to Yakima, and we'll be staying there a couple of days, or a few days. We'll have to motel down there. It's just a little too far to drive every day, and if we stay there, we can work longer hours, get more production, cover the cost of the motels, save the gas. So I guess it all works out. Plus I charge a little bit more for out of town work, kind of help cover the expenses. Victor Jr. Victor's son is coming in tonight. Got him flying in. He'll be in at 6 o'clock to 6:10 tonight. So I'm excited about that. Excited to have him back. He takes his vacation time each year and comes to help us. And he's a good grafter. We raised him in this business. He was about 2 years old when his dad started working for me. So, and Victor's kids all call me Grandpa. And, you know, they're just, I've been around their whole lives. Some of them, I was around before some of them were born. So, they all know me as Grandpa. Anyway, excited to have Victor Jr. come in. He's a real good kid. Yeah. A beautiful father, man. I love the father that he is. He's so dedicated to those kids, and I have so much respect for that. He's a single parent and does a tremendous job. I mean, he really puts those kids in the forefront. So, very commendable. I guess that's all for right now. Victor's feeling good this morning. I asked him how he was doing, and he said he felt better than he had for a couple of days, so that's encouraging. Hope he's not allergic to grafting. Anyway, I'm gonna make this short. Boy, it's some beautiful grafting, Victor. Man. Look at these precision cuts. See if I can point out what's happening here. The cambium layer is between that white wood, that hardwood, and the bark. And it's a very fine line. Sometimes it's less than the width of a pencil mark. I'll show it to you a little better on the sign. It's that little green. Well, there's kind of a little translucent line between the bark and the hardwood, and it's tiny. And that's the cambium layer. It's a one-cell layer where all growing takes place. So what we do is cut this receiving slot, and when that opens up, it makes kind of a V shape. So we cut the sign on each side to that V shape. Then when it's placed, I can't see what I'm showing you here, my viewfinder. Anyway, what we do is make sure the tip's out just a little bit, and then we show some white wood, some hardwood back here, and you know somewhere between here and that white wood you cross that cambium. People talk about cambium match, but to match it is not really what happens. It's a long bias cross. If you try to match it, if you miss it just a little bit one way or the other, you're out of business, and it does not grow. So very straight, very precision cuts. This cut on the sign has to be so straight. You can see that if it had kind of a scoop in it, if there was any cut that's not straight, it could leave a little air pocket in there, and it would dry out and die. So I'm hoping I can show you this and not have too much of it shaded. Anyway, then it's taped up with this propagation tape, which will stretch and grow. It'll grow with the graft so it does not girdle the limb. We're a little short-handed here today. This is another job we couldn't get as much help, so Victor's doing some wrapping as well. You always wrap up these flaps, cover these flaps, and then it's painted with that black asphalt emulsion to give it an airtight seal. And then about 3 weeks, or when the weather warms up, these little buds will start to push, and it's actually just the bud that grows. It's not the graft. It doesn't grow. Just the bud takes off and grows new limbs on the tree, which will produce a different kind of fruit than what it was before. Now we're putting in skeena here, and skeena needs a pollinizer. So what we're doing is doing 2 rows of skeena, and then we'll do 1 row of a pollinizer. Since lapin pollinates the skeena, it's also a variety that's marketable. So they're doing quite a lot of it. We're doing a full solid row next to the 2 of the skeena, and that way there will be plenty of pollen. Always nice to have more pollen than you need. Sometimes it requires less. Sometimes we go into an orchard like this, and if they're short on pollen, or if they find out they need pollen, some varieties are supposed to be self-pollinating, but oftentimes they find out they do need some pollen. So what we do sometimes is go in and graft every 3rd tree, every 3rd row to a different variety, and then that scatters pollen throughout the orchard. We start with the first tree on 1 row, and then we go in a couple of trees on the next row and follow that pattern, 1st row and then the 2nd tree or so, and what that winds up with is a diamond shape across the orchard that gives you your pollinizer trees. Now in the larger trees, you see we're leaving, sometimes we leave a nurse limb. That's what's called a nurse limb, or a feeder limb, or a bleeder limb. A lot of different names for it, but on the larger trees, when you have a huge root system, it can push a lot of sap. When the soil warms up in the spring, it's going to push a lot of sap, and that bleeder limb allows that sap somewhere to go. So it does not just come up and sit here. Well, we don't want the sap to come up and just sit here and flood the grafts. It's called flooding, and what happens is the grafts just sit there in that sap and they kind of sour rather than healing in. Now that's not such an issue with cherries, because we do cherries so early in the season the sap is not flowing, and that's not really a problem. Some guys just feel better about having a nurse limb, and I don't care. That's fine if they want to leave one, but personally I don't think it's critical. Now on apples, that's a different story. Young trees, about 10 years or so, it's not a problem, but if you're older than that, they can start, they have such a big root system that they can start pushing too much sap, and then when you cut that original canopy off, the sap has nowhere to go but right up here and flood the graft. So this limb will sucker up, I'm talking about apples now, but the nurse limb will sucker up, and it'll take that excess sap. So it helps kind of bleed some of that off. It just, and you can see it on apples, it'll bubble up right here, come right through the paint. So that's why you see these trees that have 1 limb left, and when I cut down, a lot of times you'll see me cut the nurse limb off because I'm thinking about the tree structure and training down the road. And sometimes the guy out here that flagged these nurse limbs, they just do that so their other guys know which limbs to cut, which one to leave. Maybe the other guys don't know as much about training. A lot of times I'll go ahead and cut the nurse limb just because they made the wrong decision. And I can look at that tree and say, well, this is the one that needs to be cut. But usually you try to find one that's off to the side and then graft the two that are more upright over the stump. And that'll give you a much more balanced tree. Now we did the same thing in here last year. They only did part of it. I'm not sure why. Maybe they did not have enough wood to do the whole project last year. Sometimes the sign wood's kind of hard to get depending on the variety. Sometimes there's a royalty on it. If a particular nursery develops a variety, then they charge a royalty for each tree that gets grafted or planted. Now here's the trees we did last year, and oh, it's beautiful. You know, I was either in the hospital or maybe I was home by then last year when Victor did this, but it's beautiful. That man knows his craft. I'm so proud of him, and he's just a good guy anyway. But these trees grew over 8 feet. That's almost 10 feet of growth in 1 year. So that's cherries for you, but you can see how those 4 little sticks have turned into an entire tree. And you can see right here is the top of that sign where they painted it, and right there, and right there. And as I said before, the buds grow, not the stick. And you can see the one nearest the graft union gets most of the nutrients, so you can see how it sizes up. And that's what you want. But that's a good strong graft now, and you see how they stake them with the bamboo and tie them and train them. And they tie them down. There's 2 reasons for tying trees. For one, it opens up the center, lets some light into this area so the fruit can get some light and get color. What I was dealing with over there, and here's a real good example. I was talking about my footing over there at that other job when I was chainsawing, and how you have to be real sure of your footing. So they use hop clips, what are called hop clips, and they're used in the hop fields for growing hops. They train them up a string, up a twine, and onto a wire. So to anchor that string in the ground, they have these little metal clips, and they're kind of a flat metal that's, I don't know how big they are, I'll have to look it up and see, but they're kind of a U-shaped, V-shaped, so they have a tool that plunges that into the ground and then it can't come back out. Then they tie the string to that, and then they pull these limbs down. Now, reason for that is if the tree grows straight up, they have to have some uprights for the structure, but they're for the primary scaffolds. But when the tree's growing straight up, when the limb's growing straight up, they tend to stay in a vegetative state, and they just want to grow and not produce fruit. So, especially on a vigorous rootstock, I think these are probably on a Mazard, which is a vigorous rootstock. There are various levels of dwarfing rootstocks, but when they tie these limbs down, it gets them down into a productive state rather than a vegetative state. Beautiful job. The cost is way less. You know, I do charge a premium for cherries because I'm kind of the only guy that really does a lot of cherries. And I've kind of gotten a reputation of doing a pretty good job on these cherries. So they're very labor intensive, and because of that I do charge a premium, but it's still way less I mean, it's not like I'm gouging them or anything. It's just, I don't know, to pull these trees out, rip them out, and when you do that, you're going to rip up your irrigation system. You have to replace that. It's very expensive to pull these trees out, and then go buy new trees. I think a new tree somewhere between, I don't know, $8 and $9, maybe $7 if you get a lot of them. And then the cost of replanting it. Sometimes you have to fumigate the soil before you go back in. That's not cheap. So on and on. The cost per acre is just it's huge, and I can come in and graft them for way less than what it costs to replace them. Plus, you get into production quicker. It's cherry trees grow pretty fast, but for apples, it's going to be about 5 years before you really get much production. And if we put a graft on there, you'll get probably a box of apples, which is a bushel, probably a box on the third leaf. So it's grafting definitely can be an advantage, and it has its place. And then there are times when the trees are just too old, and my recommendation is that they apply Caterpillar 12 ton to the acre and just push them out. So we don't ever do any jobs that we think are questionable. If I think it's not going to go well, we don't even want to start. So over the years, I've gotten better at taking aim at what I want to shoot at, and and choosing jobs that I feel like will do well. And then you know, when grafting goes bad, everybody's feelings get hurt, and we feel bad about it, and the grower suffers from it, and it's expensive, and then they have to throw good money after bad and buy new trees on top of the cost of grafting if it didn't work out. And so I just try really hard to stay out of those situations. I guess I better quit yapping and go cut Victor some wood. But if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I will try to answer as time allows. If I don't answer, then it could mean that it's already been answered. So if you don't see me answer your question, look in the comments. It could already be answered. All right. Thanks.